Hi guys, welcome to the video and welcome to this beastie here. This is the Cirrus SR22 and this rendition is by Carenado. It's for FSX / P3D and X-Plane. In this case I'm running it in X-Plane 11. Now what we're going to do in time-honoured fashion is have a look at the outside, the inside, take it for a flight and see what we think, come up with some sort of summary at the end. Now from the outset I'm just going to point out it's not a study level aircraft, so there are some areas where there's concessions, but nonetheless it's a decent looking rendition. Now before I go any further I will mention if you enjoy the video please don't forget to tick like, share or subscribe, and if you want to support me in the channel further then I've got a Patreon page. Details are in the description below. So what is the SR22? We'll kind of have a little bit of a discussion about that before we dive into the meat and bones. So believe it or not, it's about 20 years old. It's a development on from the SR20 by the company called Cirrus. And it would basically be described as a high-speed 4-seat touring aircraft. Now it's got a lot of mod cons, some of which we'll cover in this to a greater or lesser detail, but it's certainly much more advanced overall than your average Flying Club Cessna 152, 172, even a 182 and PA-28 range. Now it's got a bit of an oddity in that although it's got a constant speed prop, it hasn't got the usual blue prop lever for setting the RPM. What you've got is an overall throttle lever paired with a single mixture lever. Now it's composite construction, so hence the very sleek lines. We'll just zoom in and have a look at it from a closer position now. Now what I thought we'd do as we went through the video is I'd show different colour schemes. It's got 5 colour schemes, 5 or 6, but all sort of similar variations, and that's not really surprising because when a manufacturer builds an aircraft they often do it in limited colours and limited styles. So the first thing that grabs the eye is this metallic shiny spinner for the prop, which for me is brilliantly done. You can see basically it's got the green matching the terrain and then it's got the hedgerows off to either side. That's matched with a composite sort of scimitar style blade of prop. Really nice 3D modelling, really crisp around the edges and nice around the near the hub where it joins the spinner. Nice touch of the Hartzell stickers on the blades. Hartzell, if you're not aware, are a propeller manufacturer commonly found on particularly GA aircraft. Now the wheels have got closely fitted spats, and here's the first thing where I don't like it. This aircraft has a castering nose wheel. That means that the front nose wheel is like a shopping trolley nose wheel and you brake using differential braking between your left and right main wheels. That means that as a result you should not be able to turn the nose wheel with your pedals, but as you can see I can. So for me that's a bit of a letdown. It's quite common actually in a lot of GA aircraft that their nose wheel is modelled incorrectly and their steering is modelled incorrectly. But nonetheless that's how they've set it up, and whilst it's functional for an average sim pilot it's also unrealistic for the high detail aficionado, which is one of the reasons why I'm saying this is not a study level aircraft. Now as I come around to the side you can see the paintwork in a slightly better image, and we can start to see the texturing. Now the 3D modelling of things like the cowl over the top of the canopy / fuselage and then down towards the tail, you can see that it's modelled brilliantly with the curves. Now it's quite common with composite aircraft because you can do curves that aren't possible or aren't very easy in metal such as aluminium. You find a lot of composite aircraft are rounded and very smooth in the curves, so you can see that down at the bottom of the windshield here, at the bottom of the join between the windshield and the actual nose area. Likewise at this point I'd highlight a lot of the 3D modelling which is particularly good. So if we zoom in a little bit we can see a couple of the features a little bit more closely. You can see down here we've got a stall strip. Now these are added quite often for a couple of reasons. It's basically an aerodynamic fix where the developers of the real aircraft decide that they want to have a different pattern of airflow over the inner section of the wing, and it enables them to tailor the stall characteristics to make sure that the inner wing stalls before the outer wing. Thereby once you're into a stall you still have a limited amount of control through the ailerons for roll. What you didn't want is the outer sections, the outer portions where the ailerons are, to stall before your main lift generating surfaces. But it also provides a buffet, which is a physical and audio indication that you're approaching a stall, and it's actually something that was present on the Hawks when I was fortunate enough to fly around in them. Now again, the 3D modelling is really good. So you've got the aerial here, you've got the door cutout, you've got the area around here where the air intake is, and as you can see, the prop is crystal clear against it. But as we zoom in, we see one of the things that I find slightly poorer in terms of impact, which is the hinge area here. That could have been modelled in 3D. Likewise, this area here has been modelled in 3D where the door lock is, but unfortunately the text around all of this area is a little bit fuzzy, a little bit blurred, not particularly crisp, which is a shame. Likewise, you can see the cheat lines and the stripes going down here, again not very clear, which is a real shame because as you get close in, it detracts a little bit from the visual aesthetics of the aircraft. So we'll just zoom out again and we can move around a little bit more. You can see the flap hinges are nicely, no, don't want that, nicely modelled, again in 3D. And I think that's the takeaway message as we come round to the wingtip. You can see the curvature and the setup with the wingtip, particularly nice. And as I say, that's the takeaway message really from the exterior, is that it's superb in terms of its 3D modelling. Very, very nice. Inconsistent with its nose wheel, so it's not how it's supposed to behave, and the textures are not to the same level as the 3D modelling. So the interior, when it's 3D modelled, is actually really nice, and they're probably some of the better 3D pilots that I've seen in terms of modelling of add-on aircraft. As you can see, there's not a lot of shoulder room in this thing, but it is better than say a 152, which is frickin' tiny inside. There's a dogtooth leading edge for the wing down here. Again, this is something which is an aerodynamic fix, and if my memory serves me right, it's to stop or to reduce span-wise flow of air as you're flying. But very, very nice. Moving inside is very much the same story again. 3D modelling is wonderful. Some of the textures let it down slightly. Not as bad as the outside for me, but you can see that the 3D modelling overall is absolutely lovely in here. I particularly like the seats with the straps and the leather texturing. This is absolutely beautiful, and for me is one of the highlights of the model. It's very nicely detailed, very nicely done, and the way the shadows come through with the direct indicating compass down here is particularly nice. So yeah, it's very hard to fault this side of the interior. If we come down here, one of the areas where I've noticed a discrepancy is the difference between the speed of the door opening and the noise. So if I open it, it'll become completely obvious. You can hear that the oleo noise continues beyond opening the door, which is a bit of a shame. The controls are rather unusual looking. They're this really nicely modelled 3D handle, which as you move it around moves like that. So it's the only aircraft I'm aware of that has that setup, but I'm quite sure that it's probably very nice ergonomically. And one of the things that pilots often have to do in general aviation is they have to learn to fly with their left hand, but that's no different to an Airbus pilot at the end of the day. And likewise, a Diamond has a stick down here, so whilst you're manipulating radios, etc., you're obviously flying with your left hand down here. Now, one of the irksome points for me in here is the pedals. Obviously, they move left and right with your rudders, which is a nice animation, but if I bring it out here, you can see this is the top section. It's well worn, nice texturing where you should have your toe brakes, but there's no animated toe brakes. There's no animation at all for the toe brakes, which is a real shame. So, allied to the fact they've got the nose wheel steering wrong, that for me is a little bit of a negative. Your emergency panel instruments are nice and clear and legible. You can zoom in very close. The only thing that starts to lose it a little bit is the texturing around here. And again, we're coming back to the same old thing. Really nice 3D modelling, textures let it down. So come over here, for example, and you can see that the text in terms of this panel here is very, very clear. But if you get close into the ignition key, it starts to get very fuzzy. Gets worse if you're over this side looking at the G1000. Some of the areas start to become really fuzzy and a bit indistinct. Now it's worth pointing out at this juncture I'm using this in 4K, so this is the highest you can get in terms of the textures. Switch gears all nice, very accessible, very easy to use. Likewise, if you like, the mechanical aspects of running the aircraft are very straightforward. oxygen down here, because the aircraft, I think it's capable of achieving over 20,000 feet in altitude, which is quite staggering considering a lot of prop aircraft will hang around sort of, you know, between 4,000 to 8,000 feet. This thing goes up a really long way. Now here's one of the weird anomalies. Although it's got a Let's Rock throttle lever, which basically combines both the throttle and the prop controls, it's still got an individual independent mixture, which I find quite weird really. I'd have thought if you're going to have enough technology to combine your throttle and your propeller pitch, you would have been able to have an automatic mixture, but yeah, for whatever reason the aircraft's set up like that. In terms of avionics, Garmin G1000s, I believe this is Carenado's own rendition of it as opposed to the default X-Plane 11 one. I actually prefer the default X-Plane 11 one, and I'll explain why in a moment. But you've got an additional panel down here for controlling it. Continuing down, you've also got your autopilot panel here. Then you've got this comm radio panel for who you're listening to, who you're talking to, and then down here you've got an ADF. So it's quite a comprehensively equipped aircraft. Now what I'll do is I'll fire us up and we can get ourselves going. It's dead easy to do with this aircraft because of the way it's set up. What we'll do is just turn the batteries on. Don't need to, in fact, because it's not steady level, we can turn the alternators on as well. It's not going to do us too much harm. Don't need the ice protection. We'll turn the pitot heat on. Nav. We'll leave the strobes and landing lights for the moment. The instruments do brighten up nicely with the rear stat. Don't like the panel interior lights because of the red, just something for me that I just don't like, personal preference, but the overhead is clear white, so I tend to prefer flying with that. Now, as is the case with the G1000, when you've got the twin screen set up, the left hand one fires up with all the engine information and everything else here, and then the right one is blank. It saves a bit of power, but what we're going to do now is start the engine. So let's get us started. Dead easy really. What we'll just do is pop the batteries on, let that fire up, come down here, make sure the fuel is on. It's got tanks on the left and right hand side, so it's a very simple fuel system, but it's very similar to the PA28 in having separate tanks that you have to switch over sort of every half hour, something like that. To keep the fuel balanced. Mixture is hidden a little bit by the throttle, and it's also a bit of a pain for me to, you know, I find it several goes to get it up. Obviously if you have it if you have it mapped to an axis on your joystick, it's much easier. The throttle obviously is just a let's rock throttle, go faster, scream if you want to go faster type thing. Coming up here, standard G1000 starts with the left screen but nothing on the right screen. What we can do is just dive in a little bit. So we've got the fuel, we've got everything set. What we do need to do actually is just prime the engine. So we'll come down here, prime it for a few seconds. That should do us. We don't want boost on. Come up here and then just turn the key. And then what we're looking for is oil pressure rising into the green within 30 seconds. Because of the way it works with the combined throttle and prop lever, what you get is percentage power there. And what we can do now is we can chuck the alternators on, avionics on, so that then transfers everything over to the right hand screen in terms of navigation and engine. Just turn that on. It turns on instantly, and then really that's it, ready to go. So now with it started and all the telly's live and active, I do turn on the rear stats for it, if I'm honest. I don't like the red, although obviously I understand at night what it does is it maintains your night vision, doesn't damage your night vision, but I prefer the white light just to highlight things a little bit better. And obviously what we can do at this point is we can stick our nav lights on. We shouldn't have our strobe lights on because we're not near the runway, and we'll pop our pitot heat on just because we can. Now in terms of flight plans, you can enter flight plans either using the limited controls down here, at which point it activates on that screen, or you can come down here and plan your flight down here with a much better setup. I'm not going to go through the flight plan at this point because it would take too long, but obviously these are your buttons for manipulating your map. Now again we come to the ergonomics. Because of this not being functional in terms of flight plans, it would have been far easier to have had this functional, but obviously that's not the case. The course button is duplicated up here, or the course knob I should say is duplicated up here. However, the heading and alt select aren't. The range and FMS as well are. So it's kind of a mix where some of the things you can do up here, some of the things you can't. But what we'll do at the moment is we will just sync our heading and we'll put a course in just to show the runway heading. So in order to do that, we'll go to OBS, not OBS, CDI, sorry. Choose it to lock 1. We're not using the instrument, but what we can do is we can use it to slowly, it doesn't do click and drag in this, only does the mouse wheel, which is actually quite slow in this. But what we'll do is bring that round to give us an indication of our runway heading when we're airborne. And there we go. So in terms of flaps, I use single stage of flaps for takeoff. It's quite a nice performer in terms of takeoff because of how much power it is and how slippery it is. Take the parking brake off, which is down here. And for me, that's pretty much ready to go. If I've missed anything, then so be it. It's a sim, it's not going to kill us. Might be a little bit frustrating, but frustrating is much better than the real world where you can get yourself slightly deadificated. Taxi out past the other aircraft, some of the aluminium spam cans that don't quite have the same performance as this. This scenery is Popham, by the way. It's where we're flying out of. It's a sort of general aviation, but predominantly light aircraft as opposed to large twins. But it also has Morocco flying out of here, and it's quite well known in the UK. It's a very well known site, particularly given its location. It's fairly sort of central towards the south. One of our main navigation features actually is the A303. It's a road I used to travel down a lot when I was in the Navy, going to and from various places. And as you drive down, you can see Popham and you can see the aircraft going in and out. And it's a very nice part of the world, actually. So I'm using True Earth England as well as Popham. And it's a very nice combination, particularly for visual flying. Which we will see as we trundle along and we go around, line up and then get airborne. And this obviously in real world you can use it VFR, or it's got a good instrument capability. Just overshot the centre line a bit, but we've got plenty of performance to get over the hedge at the far end. It's interesting because it's got quite a unique approach coming in from the other end. It's got a kinked approach. It's got an offset approach to the landing, which is very nice. Trundling down here, need to get to about 70-80 knots with this. Pull back on the stick and we're airborne. It's got quite a low flap limiting speed with this, given the power and performance of the aircraft, but we'll climb about 10 degrees nose up, 9 degrees nose up, and at that point what we can do is retract the flaps and climb safely away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to climb to altitude, and once we're at altitude I'll then mess around handling with the aircraft and we'll see how we get on. Okay, so we're just trugging along, and I'm going to point out this little blue button on the autopilot. It's a function on the autopilot, but it's not strictly something that you would routinely fly with. Or certainly not in my opinion. Basically what it is a get out of jail card, I guess. So we're just skirting along the bottom of the clouds here. Let's say for example you fly into IMC conditions and you can't see where you're going. You start to get yourself a little bit disorientated because you've only done a few hours of instrument flying to get through your PPL. You haven't got an IR. And so you're not particularly great at using the instruments. It's very easy to lose sight or situational awareness as to what's going on. So this is kind of, as I say, a get out of jail card. So we'll just turn the autopilot off, get your autopilot alert, and then we'll just do this with the aircraft. And let's say you've got this position and the aircraft press level, and it's a get out of jail. It's an emergency button really, and what it will do is it will try and recover you to the preset heading and the preset altitude that you were flying at, and you can see it's trying to do quite a nice job at that. It's just coming down towards 5,000 and it's leveling the wings. So it's quite a nice feature that if for whatever reason you're in cloud and you do become a bit disorientated, let's just make sure we take the autopilot out so it's not going to fight us, and we do something like that. What we can do then is press level and it will try and recover where we were at. and obviously you're still in control of the throttle because the aircraft doesn't have auto throttle, but certainly it's a nice little get out of jail free card, as I say. And we'll turn that off now, turn the autopilot off, flight director off, and that'll do. Your damper can stay on. Turn the autopilot off, and we'll get rid of the heading. I don't want it on roll or yaw damper or flight director. There we go. Okay, so let's just go down a bit. Now, one of the things I'd say with Carenado is that a lot of their aircraft tend to run on rails. Now, for this, it's not a massive problem because this aircraft really is designed to do that. We're going over VNE, really not good at all. It just demonstrates how slippery this aircraft is. I'll come back round this way. Now, it's quite a nice handling aircraft. We'll just have a quick look at some of the stability of it. So we'll just pop a bit of power back on to maintain a good quality level of speed for checking the high speed handling. And I'm not expecting fighter pilot handling here, but in terms of stability, she's got decent, if long time period stability in terms of pitch. You can see she's trying to return to what her kind of trimmed out setting is. In terms of roll, going to the left, it's neutral, maybe slightly positive, but I don't think so. Yeah, if you look down here, it's not massively positive at this angle of attack, or at this attitude, I should say. Going to the other side, I think that weirdly the right is slightly positive. You can see it's just starting to trug a little bit in, but not by much. And then in terms of yaw, we've got good positive stability in terms of yaw. In terms of, we'll just pop that little white coloured field in front of us. In terms of adverse yaw, I don't believe there is any in this aircraft. So we'll have a look at this. If it moves right when we turn left, sorry, if it moves left when we turn left, it doesn't. And if it shifts out to the right when we turn right, and it doesn't, there's no adverse yaw in this aircraft. So let's do some slow speed handling. We'll see what the stall's like. We'll come back round this way so that we're generally flying towards Popham. And we'll see if we can get a landing back there. Down at 3,000 feet, so plenty of height for what we're going to mess around doing. Bring the nose up just a little, just so that we can start to take the speed off a bit quicker. No flap stall, so we're looking at the bottom of the green line. Let's just see what she handles like in a stall. And given the fact that she's a long distance high speed tourer, I'm expecting her to be quite stable really, so I'm not expecting anything tragic to happen in terms of the stall. It should be relatively benign, particularly with the throttle off. Stall warner coming in, speed's coming back, approximately 1 knot per second. Off to the bottom of the green, and as you can see it's really quite benign. So I've got the stick all the way back, not using the aileron, but I can use the rudder just to try and keep our wings level, and it just sits there wallowing as it, in fact it's not even really wallowing, it's just descending, and it's not even descending at a particularly high rate. It's only 350 feet per minute. Oh, now it's increasing a bit. So yeah, it's just recover, remove the cause of the stall, which was the pitch back, and reintroduce the power. Don't pull too hard, otherwise you stall again. What we'll do is we'll do the same thing with a stage of flap and power on. So put the flap down just to produce a bit of drag. And we'll put the power on maybe something like 25%. And this is going to be a nose high stall now because of the flap. I'm trying to maintain level flight, which we're doing nicely. Speed's coming down, this time looking for the bottom of the white arc. Starting to descend, stall warner comes in, and given the direction and rotation of the prop, I would expect it's probably going to fall left wing down. Keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling. It's considering it. Let's see if we can balance it with the rudders. Can just about. The stick's fully back. and it's still controllable with the feet, so obviously don't introduce aileron. It's starting to go, starting to go, starting to go. Once it goes to that point, you can't recover it. Best thing to do, remove the cause of the stall, which is pulling back, introduce more throttle, be careful you don't exceed VNE as you then climb out again. And yeah, overall the handling is quite benign. It's not going to bite you, it's not going to cause any major issues. The stall for me isn't quite there with the power on stall. Certainly this aircraft won't spin in the sim. It just won't do it at all. I've tried, and for whatever reason I can't get it to spin properly, which is a real shame. We'll come around here. Popham's somewhere down here. Need to find the A303, which I do believe is just in front of us, and then we can fly along the A303 and try and find Popham. Okay, so you rejoin me as I'm looking to come back to Popham for a straight in approach. It's got quite a unique approach. It's kind of got an offset dogleg just before the runway start. Where is it? There it is. It's over there. So this is the A303 that we come down. And what we're going to do is this wooded area here, I'm just going to go over sort of about here. You see where the green bit is there that's kind of jutting out? What we need to do is we need to get some speed right off. We're very, very high. So what we're going to do is get the speed off. Might have to do a quick orbit here really, which is very naughty. You wouldn't normally do that on an approach. Looking for the road, looking for the green bit, looking for the trees. Let's bring the nose up. Let the speed decay. We'll be naughty and bring the first stage of flap in there. Wait for the speed to go to white, and we're going to have to do a dive bomb approach here. Let the speed bleed off. Now what it's got is it's got a little white arrow here. You can only just make it out, and it's an offset approach. So you fly over this arrow, and then you have to swing a right to get over the actual airfield. So we're really, really high at the moment. As I say, dive bomb approach. Ignore the terrain warning. But if we can get down, then what we can do is we can raise the nose, bring the speed back, and do a very unorthodox approach. The white arrow is becoming clearer now. You can also see this green area where it's kind of leading you in a little bit. It's a fascinating approach in real life, although I've never actually flown it, unfortunately. Bring a little bit of power in, and you can now see the numbers of the actual runway. Gentle braking because we're on grass, so we don't want to slip slide everywhere. Reset my viewpoint so that we actually know where we're going. Bit wavy and wobbly on the grass. And that's us down. So, I suppose the big summary now. Outside, gorgeous. Just a question mark over some of the textures for me when you're close in. But the actual 3D modelling, the shaping, everything is gorgeous. Really nice curves, really nice lighting. Typical Carenado, beautiful outside. Inside, very nicely done. Some of the textures, again, a little bit blurred, but overall the inside is very nice. The G1000 is very usable. It's certainly really, really good for doing cross-country flying, etc. I don't think it's a 100% replica. My only upset really with it is the lack of the use of the alphanumeric panel, which would have been really useful, and the fact there's a couple of knobs down here that in real life aren't as much of an issue as in flight simming. So the heading knob, for example, and the altitude select knob, they are not duplicated anywhere, whereas all the other controls are, so you could fly it pretty much from looking up here. The map has slightly fewer modes for me than the normal G1000, so you'd have more in terms of these little squares down here, show you how many pages you can scroll through, etc. But as I say, overall the interior's really quite good. In terms of the handling, it's typical Carenado. It runs on rails. It's got no real positive stability in roll. It's very neutral, which I think is wrong. I think the actual aircraft with its dihedral would be more positive in terms of its stability in roll. In terms of pitch, it's very very vaguely positive, but not enough that it would stop you going into the ground. And likewise, your stability is very, very good. But overall, the handling is very nice. It's certainly not a sports car, so it's got a good 4 or 5 seconds roll from 45 degrees left to 45 degrees right, depending on how quick you're travelling. How quick you're travelling does have quite a significant effect on the handling of the aircraft. And alongside that, I would point out that the control coordination in terms of pitch, roll and rudder is quite pleasant. So it's really quite a nice aircraft to fly, particularly as a long distance tourer. It's very good. Obviously, as you'd expect, the short field performance isn't where it's targeted, but it is actually okay for getting into grass strips and the like. And combined with the high speed for cruise and the ability to go up to 20-odd thousand feet plus if you have the oxygen, certainly makes it a really nice all-round single-engine aircraft. So for me, I really quite enjoy it, bar a couple of frustrations, and so overall it's a very nice aircraft. I do like the fact they've included the blue button for the levelling. It's not foolproof, so if you're in some extreme unusual attitudes, it won't recover you in time before you hit the ground, particularly if you're below 3,000 feet. But overall it does a decent job. So if in sim world as in real world you're not overly familiar with flying instrument flying, it is kind of a get out of jail card if you go into cloud. But as I say, it's not strictly an autopilot mode. One of the things I haven't mentioned at this point is the noise, the sounds. As you'd expect, they're relatively muted in the cabin, so let's put the brakes on and just bring in the throttle. I'd expect them to be slightly more brutal than that in the cabin. Can't hold ourselves in position on the brakes. But if we go outside, the outside audio is really quite good. It's got a nice meaty sound to it. As I say, I do like the sound. Really nice in this aircraft. Chugging along at idle, and then it's got a real rasp to it as it increases power. So, as I say, overall I think it's a nice aircraft. There's a few things that do detract from it slightly, but they're not game changers for me. I certainly think it's a lovely little aircraft to fly. If what you want to do is touring. If what you want to do is short strip, then for me it's not that way inclined. Hope you enjoyed the review, guys. As I say, if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.